if you believe in the obstacle more than you believe in the goal, what do you think will inevitably win? First, you have to steady your nerves so that you can deploy any of those skills. Like, you're not compelled to listen to every thought that passes through your mind. In fact, you probably shouldn't, right? Perhaps you've done your planning in Notion and everything's laid out. But the thing is, once you start panicking, you start to throw the process out the window. And I have been reading a book called The Obstacle is the Way, and I may be pretty late to this, but this is perhaps one of the best books I've read in a very long time. The lessons or the findings in this book have honestly put into perspective so many of the things that have worked in my life and things that haven't worked, why I've been able to achieve things and why I haven't, but also other people's journeys, like why some people can just be successful, or it seems like they're able to achieve things in business, in fitness, and finances, in relationships that other people just aren't able to do. And it's the way they frame obstacles effectively, things that are always going to be in your way, in the way of what you're trying to achieve, right? They are inevitable. Right, there is no journey that you are about to embark on that is worth its weight in gold that will not have obstacles. And so the defining factor becomes how you decide to deal with these. And so let's just get into it. I have notes, I have the book here, and let's just do this. I'm also in Gran Canaria, which is why my setting is different. The wind is blowing and there's a lot going on, but I just wanted to do this. I really wanted to speak about this. And so let's do it. And this isn't about toxic positivity or, oh, everything's great all the time. And yeah, I have a problem. Like, I can't pay my bills. Obstacle is the way. That's not the point, I think, of this book at all. But it is about the decisions that you make, about the things that are within your control. And a big part of that is perspective, which is what I want to go into in this particular video, is that part of the book. So the first thing I want to talk about is recognizing your power. Now, this is the idea that our thoughts, our feelings about situations have real impacts about how we experience that, right? And I was thinking about when I was graduating after university into the pandemic, and, I didn't know what was going to happen effectively. I struggled to get a job in consulting after studying geography. And there was a couple of months where I was like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I'm used to doing well and the path being linear, and now what? And whilst I was approaching that same situation in one way of, oh, woe is me, and why won't anybody employ me, and I should be getting this and I should be getting that, that wasn't impacting my reality in a positive way, right? Like, that wasn't getting me any further to where I wanted to be. But instead, when I framed it into, okay, this isn't working out, but what else is out there? What other opportunities are out there? And it's funny because then I started applying for different types of roles, because I thought, okay, I can either recognize my power in this situation to control the things I can. If I can't get a job in consulting because of whatever lack of internships and whatever, what can I control? Can I go places where I can lean into other skill sets and I can lean into other strengths that I have? Yes. And the moment I did that, I was able to secure the job that basically changed my life effectively, the training in the tech space that led me to where I am now, effectively, coming to you from literally Gran Canaria, and talking about my path and the things that I'm learning. That recognition of power is something that a lot of us sometimes forget, or we miss out on. And that means that we get stuck in these places. We get stuck behind the obstacle because we cannot see that the power that we hold and our ability to move forward. And there's this really interesting quote from Shakespeare that he uses, and it goes, "Nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." Now, what does that really mean? Because things will happen in the material world all the time, right? They are objectively happening. You get laid off. That is just a fact that has happened to you. Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Well, that depends all on how you're going to look at it, right? Thinking makes it so. Either makes it good if I be like, oh, I've just been laid off. There are ramifications for this. And that's not to pretend, like I said, that, oh, toxic positivity, laid off, can't wait. But is this now an opportunity for me to explore a different type of role in a different sector? Is this an opportunity for me to work on my business? Is this an opportunity for me to spend a couple of months with my family? Like, what is this situation? And you get to decide within certain parameters how you're going to approach it and if you're going to recognize your power or not. And another really, really brilliant thing is you don't have to listen to your thoughts. Like, you're not compelled to listen to every thought that passes through your mind. In fact, you probably shouldn't, right? We have thousands of thoughts every single day going through, like, and they're based in part on how we're experiencing the day and who we're interacting with. But you don't have to listen to any one of them. You get to decide whether you are going to lean into some or whether you're going to ignore some. The next two things I want to talk about are actually about controlling your emotions and steadying your nerves, right? And this idea of the obstacle that is in front of us. And the thing is, when things are going wrong and when you are faced with something that is trying to throw you off your path, it's not necessarily your innate intelligence that you're going to lean on, or your fitness, or whatever. But first, you have to steady your nerves so that you can deploy any of those skills. And it's why the book talks so much about this idea of grace and poise, and why those two qualities are so important when you are in a situation where things are not going to plan. And he's drawing on this idea of when astronauts go into space and the training that they do. And I think it's really interesting the way he speaks about it, but they spend a lot of time, a heck of a lot of time, just preparing them to control their emotions and steady their nerves. It's interesting because even if you have a great plan, right? Perhaps you've done your planning in Notion and everything's laid out. But the thing is, once you start panicking, you start to throw the process out the window. And this is when things become dangerous and where you start to veer off your path. The process is there, right? The process, the guidelines, the things that you've already worked out and been researching and trialing and testing, but you start to throw them out the window when things go wrong. And that's where it's hard to see progress. Because think about a fitness journey, for example. You've worked out, how much you need to be eating, for example, protein and so forth. And things just start going a bit wrong. Perhaps you wake up and you're a bit heavier than usual and you start to panic. Oh no, I'm putting weight on again. And you start to deviate and you start to stress about the process and you basically throw it out the window. I mean, instead of continuing along the process, instead of continuing along the path that has been perhaps working in historically or perhaps alongside your research, you have evidence for that over an extended period of time will yield the results you want. You don't. You panicked now. You haven't been able to steady your nerves. You haven't been able to control your emotions when faced with this obstacle in front of you. And now it's compromising your ability to achieve the goals that you want. And it's a lot easier said than done, this idea of overriding your emotions with logic, but it does come with practice. It's something that we have to deploy routinely in order to see the impacts of, right? And one really simple thing you can ask yourself when you're starting to get stressed and feeling like, oh no, things aren't going to plan is, does panicking provide you more options? Does panicking lead you closer to where you're trying to get to? Most of the time, the answer is no, right? Most of the time, panic and confusion is not going to get you closer to where you want to be. And so it probably doesn't make sense then to lean into that. And this leads perfectly onto the next point in the book, where it's talking about the idea of objectivity and why sometimes it's beneficial to just look at things on a really superficial level. And that's like, whoa, so now we're actually encouraging to being superficial. But think about this. Again, if I take something like work or a layoff or fitness or anything else I'm trying to achieve, I can see it for what it is, right? I can see for objectively what this situation is on the superficial level, right? Taking things effectively as they are, or I can start to layer on my ideas about things, right? I can layer on my perceptions, my feelings, my thoughts. And you see how with each layer of complexity, the likelihood of things going wrong is increasing. Like, oh, this person didn't text me back straight away. They didn't text me back straight away. Now I layer on, they didn't text me back straight away because they don't like me. Do you see that jump? And I know you're laughing because you've probably done that before. Like, oh, they didn't text me back within 3 seconds. Like, they don't like me. Did they? Or did they just not text you back? The reasons why they haven't texted you back straight away, we don't know yet. We don't know. We're not sure. Does it really matter? Is it going to help the situation? Is it going to give you more options? Probably not. But it goes even deeper than that, because it's one thing to control your emotions in the face of the obstacle, but it's another thing to actually alter the way that you view the obstacle itself, right? Like the next step is not just how do I say overcome this obstacle, but how do I actually frame this obstacle as an opportunity, as something that I can leverage to get me closer to where I want to be. There's a really interesting example in the book where Ryan uses George Clooney to illustrate this idea of altering your perspective. George Clooney at the beginning of his career was getting rejected left, right, center. Nobody was interested, right? And we're all like now, like George Clooney, nobody cared. They didn't care. And it wasn't until he stopped seeing it as I'm looking for my big break. I'm looking for somebody to give me my big break. And instead thought about how I was going to solve the problem for the producers, for the people who are looking for actors to fill the spot. Like, I am the answer that they're looking for. So you show up differently when you are coming from that angle, right? Coming from that perspective. It's no longer, oh my God, I hope they really do this for me. And it seems really small. But I've even noticed this in job interviews or when I'm going for opportunities. If you reek of desperation, and I know that sounds really strong, people can sense it. People can sense a desperate individual, and it doesn't usually breed like the outcome that you want, right? And sometimes it can lead to you being taken advantage of. Versus when you show up in a confident manner, in a way where you see yourself as resolving a problem for the other person, the outcomes can be very different. And it's not just about other people and how you can alter your perspective when working with other people. It's really about yourself as well. I used to be really upset about the fact that I naturally am prone to weight gain. Like, I just put on weight. It just happens all the time, effectively. I say all the time, but if I don't think about the way that I'm eating and my exercise and just, eat, I'm somebody who will just gain a lot of weight very quickly. It's just how I'm built. And for the longest time, I saw that as woe is me. I wish I was one of those people who just didn't put on weight and la-di-da-di-da. But thinking about that same situation differently and starting to go to the gym, right, which is what I did, and started lifting and started eating better. That shift in my approach, but also the way that I saw this was an opportunity for me to get better at lifting, to get better in terms of my understanding of fitness. I even ended up doing a course and becoming a certified fitness coach. Like, there are so many things that happened. And when I look back at it now, I think this is one of the best things that ever happened to me. Like, I have completely shifted my perspective in terms of this weight gain thing. Yes, sometimes it's like, I wish I could eat all the pasta, but also, would I trade it in? I might not have started lifting so early. I might not have created the guide that I've shared with you guys on how to get lifting and how to create the shape that you want by using weights, by using resistance. Perhaps I never would have made the videos that I've made or had the discipline to execute the things that I do in life, not just in fitness, but beyond. Like, the obstacle quite literally became the way. And I think this is just one of the things in my life that illustrates it so perfectly, where being prone to weight gain is the obstacle, right? It is the problem that is stressing me out or whatever. But it actually became the way. It became the path to a new way of life. It became the path to a new way of seeing fitness and exercise and food. It became the way. And I really was thinking about this on the plane when I was reading the book, like, wow, that is phenomenal. Again, feeding into this idea about altering your perspective is this decision that you make about, are you going to control the things that you can, or are you going to throw effectively everything out the window? Is it up to you? And are there things that are within your control? Because if there is an ounce of something that you control in that situation, whether it even just be your thoughts about the situation or the angle that you approach it at, whatever it is, if you can then zone in on that and control that particular aspect, what could be possible? And Ryan talks about a number of things that you can focus on, like the things that you can change. I'm going to read them out, like your emotions. So that's within your control. That is up to you in this situation. Whatever is happening to you, you can control that. Your judgments, like, what are you layering on top of this? Like, what are you bringing into the situation, into the scenario, and how is that impacting the results? Your creativity, you have control over the creative outlook and the creative perspective that you layer on top of this. How are you going to take this obstacle and make it a strength, like we said? What, in terms of your artistic abilities or your experiences, can you intertwine with this in order to get closer to where you want? Your attitude, which is quite self-explanatory. Your perspective, your desires, your decisions, your determination, all these things are within your control. I don't know what's going on, but they're moving tables. Now, one of the biggest things that I struggle with, and I know a lot of people do, is living in the present moment. And this is one thing that will stop your ability to move past the obstacle or use obstacles to your benefit. And it's because we get so consumed with the future and what's going to happen in the next week, month, year, decade, that we stop to understand the opportunities that are there right now and how we can use our skills and our experiences to leverage these opportunities. And he actually lists a number of companies that were founded or that started in times that would be considered very, very bad, right? Depressions, recessions, financial crisis, economic crisis, and so forth. Things like Disney, Walt Disney, which is one of, the biggest entertainment brands in the world. LinkedIn, Microsoft, Costco, FedEx, so many companies that they could have thought, oh, well, based on the current situation and our projections for the future, this isn't the best time to start a company, right? And had they gone down that route, they perhaps wouldn't have had the company and the business they have right now, because they would have been so consumed with what was happening tomorrow or the next day. And this isn't to say in business you don't have projections and think about things, but if you allow that to consume you to the point where you've forgotten what's going on in the moment and what you are trying to achieve right now, any obstacle will basically take you out the game. And it's one thing to understand that you should stay in the present, but how do you do these things? This is where you can use simple but effective tasks to ground you. Things like exercise, whether it is strenuous, something like, lifting weights, because it is very dangerous when you're doing something like lifting weights to not be present. So it forces you and trains your mind to be there with you at that moment. But even going for a walk, and going for a walk without music or without podcasts in your ear, which is one way you can do it. But then you have to be present in that moment. You have to be cognizant of what is going on around you, taking in the sights, the people that you pass, all of these things, because well, there's not much else to do. So lean into activities in your life that force you to be very present, that force you to be aware of what is going on around you, because it will train your mind in the long term to stop wandering so much, stop going so far into the future to the point where, again, you stop being where you are at now and making use of those opportunities. So one of the last things that's spoken about in this part of the book is this idea about thinking differently. And the author draws on Steve Jobs, who was somebody who was obviously usually drawn on when we think about pushing boundaries and thinking about things differently. I mean, the iPhone in its concept was radical, right? This idea that there's going to be a touchscreen for a phone, that wasn't a thing, right? We're talking about keyboards before that, the BlackBerry and so forth. Steve was known and relentless about when people he encountered and had in the team saw obstacles as the end of the road. It was pretty much the end of their road, right? He was known to not want to be around people who, instead of seeing obstacles as opportunities or, how are we going to move past it or how are we going to utilize it, just thought, this is it. It's time to go, because it wasn't cohesive. It wasn't coherent with the way that Steve saw life. And where anybody who's really trying to push the boundaries of anything, push the boundaries of your own life or what you're trying to achieve in your business or your content creation or your relationship, are you going to be like, well, this is never going to work? Or are you going to start framing it differently? And this can be very hard because a lot of us are being told to be realistic all the way from school and picking university degrees and picking jobs. Like, be realistic, be conservative, instead of thinking about things differently and opportunities differently, which is essential in the world that we live in now, where you have people making a living because they're basically doing what I'm doing now, right? Taking their ideas, taking their interest, making content around it, inspirational content or useful and informative content. The world is very different, right? And so long as you start thinking about things in a way that is counter to the narrative you've been told, there will be opportunities that you see that other people will not. And there's another really good quote that I think leans into this idea about how Steve Jobs saw the world. And it's this idea that if you believe in the obstacle more than you believe in the goal, what do you think will inevitably win? Will it be the obstacle or will it be the goal? Right? And that's a very, very simple line. I'm going to read it again, actually, quote from quote. When we believe in the obstacle more than the goal, which will inevitably triumph? I really, when I read that line, I said, yeah, this book is serious, because it's, again, such another simple thing and way of seeing things, but so powerful, so powerful. And leading on from this idea of thinking differently is ultimately finding the opportunity. Like I said, once you've controlled your emotions, you're steadying your nerves, you're leaning on objectivity, it then becomes about the opportunities. And I have spoken to a lot of people who, for example, are trying to get into tech, and they speak about their lack of experience, this being the obstacle. And as I was reading the book, this is one of the things that was coming to my mind. I typically ask the people that I'm speaking to, whether it's in mentoring sessions or consultations, or even just like online, where are you coming from? Like, what do you have to draw on right now? For example, I've spoken to people who have worked in healthcare or worked with on one-to-one with patients, for example, in very challenging situations where they need to understand the end user, in this case, the end user, I straight to my tech brain. They need to understand the patient and effectively what their needs are. They need to turn whatever the patient is saying or whatever they are showing their symptoms into a solution. That, my friend, is a big part of what tech is and what building products in the tech space that people want to use and that people see value in. It's a huge part. Empathy, right? And so now there's an opportunity here. Instead of seeing the fact that you lack experience or that you've come from a healthcare background or you've come from an education background as an obstacle, this is an opportunity. This is your strength. And when I talk to people about interviewing, I said, don't shy away from this stuff. Lean into this stuff. Lean into the things that you think are holding you back, because a lot of the time, these things are your superpower. They are the things that set you apart from other people in the space and allow you to operate in ways that they cannot. Anyway, this is a fantastic book. I would highly recommend this book at the top of your list if you're thinking about what to read next. We will continue to break this down. I'm definitely going to do another video because there's more parts to this book. This is just part one. But I think the framing of the obstacle and the obstacle being the way is a fantastic way of viewing issues in your life and viewing challenges along the journey that you're on. The alternative is to let the obstacle win, let it hold you back, and not move forward. I will see you in the next video.